there's one thing that people are especially greedy of, it's the greed of personal privacy. Privacy is important. We all need our own measure of that. But I'm going to begin addressing an issue that I think is really crucial to today in our society, and I think it is especially crucial and becoming more so for our church. And you'll see why it's becoming, how could something become more crucial, why I think it's becoming more crucial for our church. And it happens also to be the last of these American worldviews that we're going to discuss. When you hear what it is, you might say, well, is that just a new thought of yours? There are whole books being written, which have been written and are being written by psychiatrists and psychologists, and I guess especially sociologists, on what they see from their own statistical studies. And we don't have to do those. We can tell from our own daily contact with the world, with American society, what is taking place. And that is the philosophy of individualism. Individualism, which means just that. It is a greed of personal privacy. Now, I want to say a lot of things. I want to say at the outset here, everything that you're going to be hearing, I believe is true and factual, but there is another side to the issue of commitment and involvement that we're going to be discussing even here in ethics before too long. There is another side. I don't mean for anyone to take what we will be studying under individualism and go overboard with that. I think whenever you hear both of them, you'll understand what I mean. But more than talking about privacy, I guess I'd be talking about commitment. And if there's one thing that goes along with, and it goes along as an opposite with individualism, it's the theme of the subject of commitment. Some book titles or subtitles even have that in them as well. If there's another term that goes along with individualism, it's freedom. People want to be free. They want to be free from commitments to others. They want to be free from relationships with others, unless they're casual relationships, which are no relationships. If no commitment is involved, there's no true relationship there. Think of the sexual ethic today. We want sex with no consequences with strangers. We want love but no relationship, so. We want our freedom to be who we are, to live as we want, to do what we will to do, without the restraints of commitments to and with other people. Fewer children being born, marriages lasting not nearly as long as before. It's a whole greed of personal privacy, of individualism. It's an individualistic ethic, which is an ethic of base, gross, carnal, demonic selfishness. And it is an attempt to set up human society as God never intended it, as we will see. And I say that we're going to see a need for this, I think, more and more in our own church. I see a need for the study of this false philosophy, which is an anti-social, anti-personal, anti-Christ type philosophy, individualism. The privatization of life. The privatization of life is a curse. It is not scriptural. It is not healthy to society. It is not healthy even to those who want to be the best individual they can be. You'll never be the best individual by yourself. That will never happen. Today, in this desire for individualism, I find it ironic that we get so little individual concern or care or attention from other people. Think how you are treated, not as an individual, by businesses, by mail order companies, by junk mail producers. You are treated just as one of the group of no-thinkers out there, just one of the herd who's following the path. Now, in the olden days, it wasn't that way. Here again, I think we find the ironies in the things that people are after. There is a way to receive them. There is a way to receive what they're really after, which is personal fulfillment in life. But you won't experience that through individualism, where one isolates himself from society, isolates himself from others because he doesn't want the commitment involved with others, and because he's basically selfish and greedy. He doesn't want to give his time, his money, his resources to anyone but to himself. That is the spirit of individualism that we're going to be discussing. Here with individualism, there is no concern for the common good. I guess for most people in this individualistic ethic, there is no common good. The only thing that's good is what I can get out of life. What me, myself, and I, or at the most, my family, can get out of life. There's no common good, so there's no concern for the common good. Now, this has some serious consequences, this spirit of individualism, this individualistic ethic, this refusal to be a part, except a part of your own life and a part of your own world. And as I say, sociologists have written books on this, best-selling books on this. Some that are still in print, best-selling books on this today, detailing statistically the results of what has taken place right before our very eyes in American society, some of which I'm sure is due to some of the things we discussed last time in looking at the spirit of the age. Some of the things that this produces, I would say, would be, first of all, our sense of community or group strength and responsibility has been all but vanquished. Our sense of community or group strength and responsibility. Now, this morning, I don't really intend to get into the church or the Christian aspect of it yet, but you'll be able to have a foretaste of that and see where we're heading if you just listen carefully enough. Our sense of community or group strength and responsibility. I mean, there is strength that results and derives from a community or a group, and there is responsibility as well. In other words, there are blessings that we receive, but there are things that are required of us as well to be a part of a group. I mean, if you go to school, they have whole classes on this, how to be a part of a group. And people today in our society are finding it very, very difficult. They're less and less capable of being a groupie, of being a member of a group. Now, they'll be a member of a gang or a pact or something as long as no deep relationship is involved. You know, they'll mix with a lot of people as long as it's kind of out of sight, out of mind type relationship. You think of the groups of people or the gangs of people, is there any basic commitment there? There's no commitment at all. Have you ever been to school and had a friend backstab you? I mean, a friend? Well, those aren't friends, but they were your friend. You called them your friend, and they said, I'm your friend. And then as soon as you fall out of favor with the crowd, well, your friend's not your friend anymore then. They were your friend as long as they could get something out of it. As long as they could get something out of it. As far as putting something into it, oh, you have to go back to the old books or movies or the Bible to find anything like that. Now, what God has shown us in His Word is that He is the friend of the friendless, and He's one who sticks with us through it all. You don't find people in government, people in entertainment, if they fall out of favor with the crowd, their friends that were friends are not friends any longer. What would be almost like, a modern story of morals, if we saw someone who really fell out of favor, an important person with the crowd, and someone equally, or I would say more important than them, stuck with them through it all. They'd get books and TV shows and interviews for articles and magazines and newspapers because that would be so out of step with the times today. People don't know how to be a part of a group or how to be a member of society, a functioning, contributing member of society. You know as well as I do that people are only in this life to see what they can get out of it. And they complain and complain and complain if they ever have to give anything, if they ever have to put anything into society. They want to be nursemaided. They want to be a child, a grown-up child. They want society to give them, or groups and those superficial relationships to supply all the deficiencies they have in their life, all the needs they have in their life, all the desires and wants they have in their life. But do they want to give anything in return? No way. People want to, let's take a religious example. People want to come to church on a Sunday morning and be ministered to and maybe be taught the Word of God if it's more of a church that believes in teaching the Word and people receiving and believing the Word. But do they want to put anything into it? Not at all. They leave that church and go out their own life, their own separate existence the next 6 days of the week. Do you know the church is not on their mind? There's no intercession for the church. There's no intercession for the ministry. There's no intercession for problems that have arisen or might arise in the church. There's no spiritual warfare. There's a little bit of perfunctory giving in the offering plate, and that's about all. People don't want to be tied down. So what we've got to understand to begin with here is if we are individualistic, it's because we have a basic problem concerning commitment, because commitment takes something from a person. Why are the marriages not lasting? People won't stick it out. People will not stick it out. Now, in the earlier days, people had problems in their marriages just like they have today. But today, it's fashionable now. You no longer are a stigma if you're divorced and remarried. And you just talk to people all the time. Wednesday, I was in my study, and the people came by to deliver the blocks for the building our house up there. And I had to go up there with the man and deliver the blocks, and he was older than I am. He had, a little bit of gray hair, more than a little bit of gray hair, but I could tell that he wasn't like 35 years old. We were talking, and I said, well, do you enjoy your job? And he said, well, it's a job. Everyone says that. Well, it's a job, isn't it? And you want to say, that's not the question I asked. Do you enjoy what you're doing? And so I asked him, well, don't you enjoy what you're doing? He said, well, I guess so, but he said, it's not any fun to do on your honeymoon. I said, oh, honeymoon. I said, so what happened to you recently? Well, I just got married. And I said, oh, congratulations. But I knew as soon as he was telling me that, I just knew what I was going to hear. And I hoped I was going to hear, yep, I'm 42 and I finally decided to get married. But no, as soon as I said something about congratulations, he said, oh, it's nothing. It's my second time. I thought, oh, it's nothing. It's your second time. And I'm sure it's the second or third for his wife. And, isn't that what you expect almost when people tell you they got married? Unless you can tell they're 18 or 19 years old. If they're any older than that, you just expect, this is my second time. This is my third time. That's just incredible what's happening with people. I read a statistic the other day that told how many marriages would take place in this country, how many thousands of marriages this year, and it said 2/3 of them, 2/3 of the marriages, the wedding ceremonies performed this year, 1988 in the United States of America, 2/3 of them are second or third marriages. Only 1/3 of them are biblical marriages here. One man and one woman joining themselves together and not for the second or 18th time. 2/3. 66 out of every 100 people who are marrying are doing it for the second and third time. You see, it's fashionable to divorce and remarry. Or to say it another way, you're no longer a stigma like you were in society. Maybe fashionable is a little too strong of a word. I guess in Hollywood circles it's not too strong of a term. But if that's too strong where we live, at least this isn't too strong. People don't feel the repulsion of society around them against their second or third marriage like they did at one time. If you were a divorced woman, it's like, whew, what happened to you? This is a bad woman here. Or you were a divorced man. Well, probably you were a truck driver or you worked on a ship or something. A divorced man, a divorced woman. Why do we have that problem today? An individualistic ethic. Have you ever had problems in your marriage? Problems? Why did you have problems? Things didn't work the way you wanted them to. And so you just had to stay with that marriage anyway, though. If you want it to work at all, it won't do you any good to give up. That's for sure. But I guess what society feels is that's not the point. Of course it won't do me any good in this marriage to give up. But it'll do me some good in my life to give up because I can marry again. What does it do for that woman that you were married or that man you were married to? What does it do for your children? And really, what does it do for you in the long run? But they just think in an individualistic sense that I have to experience something in life and I'm not getting enough here. Right. And to put something into the marriage, to talk about commitment, to talk about group or society relationship or group or society strength is foreign to people. And I would say that this spirit of individualism has all but vanquished that in favor of this ethic, an individualistic ethic, which is basically selfish in orientation. What is individualism? But it's a manifestation of selfishness. It's I want. We're going to see some biblical examples here in a moment, but we should know enough that that's wrong. That attitude of I. My needs aren't being met. My needs aren't being met. Well, your needs aren't the only needs in the world. Your husband, your wife have needs. Your children have needs. People around you, the church has needs. Needs for you. That if you do something wrong, you're going to defeat the purpose of your existence in that relationship. Society around you has needs. People who are individualistic can't supply these needs that others need around them, that they even have for themselves. I think what we'll find in the long run is that the person who's after freedom will never get freedom. They'll be in bondage their whole life. Here's another thing that it produces. I think that it has eroded our sense of structure in society. Not only has it weakened our sense of community commitment, but it has weakened the structure of our society. Here's what I mean by that. Structure is a whole. When individualism takes over, we have fragmented pieces in society. Without the glue of commitment to hold them together, we have no whole, W-H-O-L-E. We have no whole. We have fragmentation in society. People doing their own thing and going their own way. And I would say that an eventual byproduct of this spirit of individualistic selfishness as a way of lifestyle is probably the annihilation of life and commitment as we know it. Somewhere in the future, the annihilation of life and commitment as we know it. Again, I'm sorry, but I'm always intrigued with these books like Brave New World or 1984. These predictive sci-fi books of what's going to happen to society if society continues along the path that it currently is on. Annihilation of life and commitment as we know it. Go back to what we discussed last week with the 1960s. I think there we had a foretaste. The spirit of nihilism. That's kind of an end result of a lot of these, if not all of these philosophies that we've discussed. One of them being this morning's discussion of individualism. Nihilism. What did those people want? What did those young people want in the 1960s? They wanted freedom without the consequences. They wanted privileges without responsibility. They wanted privileges and no responsibility. They wanted relationships and no commitment. Who is it commitment to those people? You hardly knew who you were smoking or sleeping with. But I guess that was the whole point. We're free now. I'm not going to be like my old fogey parents and marry somebody and have to wake up every morning to the woman and the man as they get uglier and uglier and older. Who wants to do that? And after all, look at my parents. They've had a bad marriage. And probably a lot of that would be true with those people. And so why even go through all the hassle of getting married? No one says you have to get married. There's no law that says you have to. You can do your own thing. Well, there is a law. There's a spiritual law, an eternal one, that's written in God's books.
Amen.
But if you want to know that type of relationship, you may only know it in marriage.
Amen.
And they chose to turn their nose up at God and throw His commandments in His face. And our society, friends, going to suffer the consequences of that.
Right.
We're not just going to go, well, we were wrong, but now we're better. Sodom and Gomorrah were overthrown with fire and brimstone for the repulsive nature of the sins they were committing before God. And this country is at least tenfold as wicked as Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah didn't have any light. They were a bunch of pagans down there doing pagan deeds. We have a lot of light in this country. We've overthrown all of that light, all in the name of constitutional civil rights that belong to us. We've overthrown biblical rights and responsibilities for civil rights. And as a result, we're going to have to suffer the consequences of it. Whether it's going to be in some great national drought, I mean a drought of Israel's days in Ahab's years, of many years long, not just a couple of hot months in the middle of the summer, years long. All it takes are just a few things like this. And life, as we are now experiencing it right now, being able to go to the store and go to the bank and will cease to exist.
Amen.
It has in other countries. The communists have come in and taken over, and life, as those people knew it, ceased to exist. There's no more life. You go into the bakery, and there'd be one roll in the shelf there. One. All the tyranny of the communists completely drove, everything is geared for the state there, rather than for the common good. It's still a spirit of individualism there. It's for the state's good. It's not for the people's good. And as a result, people are starving. Or people stand in line, for hours to get their ration of meat that month, which is maybe, half a pound of meat per family per month. We have had our head in a hole in the ground in this country to think that we're going to continue to exist this way forever.
Amen.
We won't. Somewhere in my lifetime, the next lifetime, it'll happen. No country prospers and lasts forever. No country does. It's just we've never seen the downfall of ours yet. We don't think it's going to happen, but it's going to, though. Whether invasion of the communists or a drought or some calamity that God sends upon our country, I don't know what it'll be. But something will come that will erase, that will annihilate life as we're experiencing it now. And if people in this country haven't learned, or they have unlearned, they knew it at one time, how to stand together, and I'm just speaking from the country's point of view, not from even a Christian point of view now, they'll never be able to make it, and they'll never survive. There are some of the results. I would say here are some of the causes of this spirit of individualism. You think about this as we go along. Some of the causes of this spirit of individualism. First of all, something I'd have to rank very, very high, probably the highest thing, is modern technology. Modern technology has distanced us from one another. With telephone, the news media, with rapid modes of transportation, it has distanced us from one another. People talk about the world being a global village. That's something that the sociologists like to use all the time, a global village. Well, it's more like a global metropolitan area. It's not like a village. In villages, people know one another, and they're close together. Metropolitan area, you may all be close to each other, spatially, but you're not close to each other in any other way. That's what I mean by being distanced. Modern technology has distanced us from one another. Just take the one subject of the mass relocation of people. Oh, let's say since the 1950s, the post-suburban, post-war boom. The car had been around, but for the first time, multitudes of people, middle-class people, could afford automobiles, could afford to drive automobiles. That wasn't true back in the days when the automobile was first invented.
Yeah.
You really saw that in the post-World War II boom years. We had an economic boom, and everyone, just about anyway, could buy a car, could buy a television set. They could actually own these things, but especially a car. And as a result, you have a mass relocation of people. And what does that do? That moves people out of a community, a village, if you will, in which they were raised and brought up, where there were commitments and values that were maintained. Now you're spread all over the country or the world. And because of technology with transportation, you're put in places where the people around you are strangers to you. And the people around you seem to change so frequently. And this, of course, is especially more true in some areas than in others. And as a result, people just don't want to know each other. Technology in so many different ways. That's just one area. Modern technology has distanced modern man from his friends with the mass relocation of people. Probably the people around you, I'm talking about where you live, are people that you don't know. And you live unto yourself. There may be some good Christian causes for this. Remember, we're not talking from that perspective right now. We're talking about the way it used to be with people in this country. You can be on a street with 50 families up and down your street. And it would almost be a rare thing if you knew, well, how many? How many do people know on their street today? Where in the good old days, you knew everybody by name. You knew what the father did for a living. You knew what type of car they drove. You probably knew their income. Everybody knew everybody's business. And how true is that? You move into a larger type setting, a larger city. How true is that? You know, there was a book written back in the 50s. I forget the author's name. I don't know if it's still in print. But it was a good book. And it was entitled The Lonely Crowd. Now, that was in the 1950s. It'd be a good book to read today and a good one to write today. Notice the contradiction in the term, the lonely crowd. Now, wait a minute. Now, if you're alone by yourself, you might be the lonely crowd. Or it's a good old stereotype of people hustling and bustling, getting on a New York City subway. No one knows anyone, and no one wants to know anyone. You talk to someone, they think you're going to be robbed or something there. They'll point a gun at you if you talk to them. You're supposed to put your paper up in your face and just read and ignore. You don't want to look around. You might catch someone's eye and they might try to rob you later on. You ever been in a place like that and the incredible negative demonic feelings that are around? You know, you don't get on a subway and just start striking up a conversation and just talk to the fella and people will shoot you. You do things like that. They don't want you to get involved with them. They don't want to be involved with you at all. They don't want to give you any information about themselves. It's just hustle and bustle, back and forth, get on the subway. And it's just a race to get home to the suburbs somewhere where you can relax with your wife and maybe a couple of friends you have in the neighborhood. And then it's a dreadful thing to get on the subway the next morning with all these hoodlums and just weird people around. And maybe not so weird, maybe with three-piece suits on, but you don't trust them, though. They don't trust you. And it's a race. It's a dreadful, frantic race to get back to the office early in the morning where you feel secure in your little 4x4 cubicle that someone's given to you in a high-rise building. You've got your little cubicle there. And then it's a race to get back home in the evening. Modern technology. The olden days, some people had some wagons and some people walked. And those who walked were picked up by those who took the wagons into town. And today it's not like that at all. You know, you pick up a hitchhiker, you're probably going to get raped or stabbed, one or the other. The olden days, that was kind of the thing to do. Pick up a hitchhiker out there. Poor man here, there, going, we don't know where, but we'll give him a lift. You don't trust people today. You have to be led of the Lord to pick up some of these people out there. People get stabbed and raped and murdered and robbed all the time just from picking up someone. Picking up someone out. And so the problem today is very few reliable people even hitchhike anymore because they know no one's going to pick me up because they are expecting that I'm like everyone else out there. You'd have to have a suit on if you want to get picked up and preferably be standing by a broken down car. And then probably someone would stop and pick you up. Otherwise, I pass people all the time, friends. I'm not about to pick them up. They got bags over their back, long beards down here. I'm not about to pick them up unless I feel led to, and some I have. But most, I just whiz right on by. They're out there thumbing their way. I'm not going to stop and pick them up. Or a young girl and a young boy, long hair and a bandana covering her old greasy hair up. I'm not going to stop and pick them up. And just for an example, there was a fella who had like a Hawaiian shirt on. You know what I mean by Hawaiian? Just, okay. Long red hair. I mean, just as red as they come. And his shirt opened up, and he had been hired by some local farmer down there where we live to drive the tractor and do some things like this. So he was cutting some hay across the street from us. And it was a hot day. He was out there cutting. And I didn't have to plan on it or think about it. Just, well, you know, if I were out there, I'd be thirsty. He didn't carry a water jug with him. So I filled up a glass of ice water and gave it to one of the children and said, run across the road and we'll give that to that man over there up on that tractor. And so he did, and the fellow comes around and stops, and he turned off the tractor, and I think he even got down, or at least he reached down to get the drink of water. And it's like most people wouldn't do that for someone. Right across, I don't know that young man. I've never even seen him before. He's not like a regular hand runner. I've never even seen him before. And I certainly don't know him, don't know his name, don't know anything about him. But in the olden days, friends, things like that were expected. People helped out one another. But I'm saying because today we're around people that we don't know, and it's because of modern technology, then I think individualism is an obvious result of that. An obvious result of that. Another cause of individualism, and I think this itself has been a product of modern technology, and that is that the economic and work philosophy of this country has changed. The economic and work philosophy of this country has changed. Here's what I mean by that. I mean several different things, but for instance, neighbors rarely help out other neighbors because their philosophy of working and of economics has changed. Today we have specialized professions to whom most of that work can be hired out. And so neighbors rarely help each other anymore. You know, if you live next door to an elderly woman who lived alone, an elderly woman, you probably wouldn't mow her lawn. Why? Well, she can always hire that out. We're always thinking, well, they can always hire that out. Well, yes, they can, but you could really be a sunshine in their life to say, I'll volunteer to do it for you. Yeah, an elderly person. I've mowed elderly people's lawns before. Maybe not all the time, but I've done it, and I've enjoyed doing that. Today we think, no, neighbors don't help neighbors. We're just going to hire all these, or we're going to think they're going to hire all these things out. And whenever it comes time for them to need something, they don't want to ask for any help from any of the neighbors. See, all these reasons begin to snowball. Number one, you don't know the people around you because of, whatever comes before one, modern technology. One thing then leads to another, and it leads to individualism, which, as I'm saying, is eroding our whole ability to cope and to commit to one another in this world. There's no coping power, there's no committal in this world at all, not in this society anymore. Others maybe so. Overseas maybe so. Some parts of this country maybe so. But for the most part, you're not going to find that to be true. Our whole philosophy of work has changed now. And some of it has to have changed because of modern technology. People hold different types of jobs today than they ever held before. It wouldn't be possible without modern technology. A lot of jobs were jobs that you did where you live, like farmers. You worked right there. Now, most jobs, you see, people aren't on farms anymore. What has done that? Modern technology. As long as I have breath, I'll say that's a curse to our world. There's not a lot we can do to reverse that, but it's a curse to our world, though. Now, with modern technology, fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer farmers are even needed. That pushed everybody off the farm. And one thing led to another, and one thing was the result of another. Modern technology did that, but then modern technology also opened up innumerable other jobs for the people who are pushed off the farm. Now, if you're pushed off the farm, you can go in the factory to make the equipment to send to someone else's farm, And modern technology has done it all. Our whole philosophy of work and of economics, I would say, has been drastically altered in this society. And as a result, neighbors don't help. There are specialized professions around. Money does everything. In the olden days, people didn't just have money. We have money today. We have bank accounts today. A lot of people didn't have that. You had goods. You had property that you owned. You had possessions. You had farm equipment. You had livestock. You had a home that you owned. Money in a bank account? $50,000 in a bank account? No, most people didn't have that. Again, I'm saying things have changed, therefore we have changed along with them. And so two things have to be kept in mind. Number one, don't feel too guilty because there's not a lot you can do as a single human being to reverse the tide of human history. You simply can't do that. You just either have to cope, get along with modern technology, or move out on your own. But then number two, let's don't be desensitized by all of it and depersonalized by all of it. What we have tried to stress before in looking at modern technology and secularization. We have to remember that. I don't feel guilty because I can't reverse by myself, or we couldn't as a group, the course of human history. There's no way. Modern technology has come and it will forever be here until something destroys it and wipes it off the globe. But meanwhile, we can keep our values and our priorities right. We can hear messages like this, and we can read things in God's Word, and we can understand some things about basic commitment, that human beings commit themselves to other human beings, not to machines. You don't commit yourself to machines, but to other human beings. And you remember that, so you're not desensitized, and you're not depersonalized in these areas, so that a person becomes one who adopts this ethic of individualism, which is selfishness gone to seed. It's I, for me, me, me. Times have changed and people have changed, but we need to be careful in our attitudes. And then something else, I think, that is a cause of this spirit of individualism is the rampant distrust and cynicism that is seen in this country. That's true to a whole lot of things, just a whole lot of things. These aren't classes in sociology, or I guess you go in all the details. They're just enough to get you thinking as maybe you've never thought before about all these various areas of living. I know you don't get this in your average church, not even in your better than average church. You don't get it in any type of church where you're made to think and to look around, and now you think about where you shop and what you do and what you eat and where you go. You're a thinking person now. You even if you do something that's involved in modern technology, you're not just a non-thinker anymore. You're aware of the consequences. You're aware of dangers. You're aware of some safeguards that have to be taken. Not even the above average church has anything like this going on in it. Because, you know, it's like you're advocating a return to the monastery or something. And you know people won't go for that. They want 2 cars and 4 homes and 3 boats and motorcycles and water skis and snow skis and ski passes and a summer home and a winter home and children educated in college. And you know what they want? It's a spirit of greed today. People don't know how to live just a simple lifestyle and be satisfied with a simple lifestyle. Because, you're challenged by people around you. What are you doing being satisfied? Look at me, me, me. Greed, greed, greed. Cynicism and distrust. In this country, go back to last week's message, caused by a lot of that. Cynicism and distrust. It can't help but affect all of us. I don't put an ounce of value in what I hear politicians say. Not an ounce of value. I just don't, I'm not even curious. I'm not even interested. It's all a bunch of lies. It just fills the front page of the newspaper. And I generally turn to the second or third to look for something that happened, something that's worthwhile. I don't even read that. I don't even read what's going on in the Senate or what's going on or the bill. I don't even read that. It's a lot of nonsense and stupidity. Nothing can ever be done because people won't agree on it. Everybody has their own opinion. We're not working for the good of the whole American people and the whole American society. We're not working for that good anymore. It's one lobbying group versus another high-powered lobbying group. And it's this man against that man. I don't trust any of that. I just don't trust it at all. And I'm cynical against all of it. I think government, as most governments that I have seen, government's really just a waste. It's a waste. It's a waste of people, a waste of money. It's God ordained, but it's a perversion of what God intended. It would be better, as I have said over all these years, to have a dictator, one who knew what he wanted, who got what he wanted. At least it was dependable. You knew what tomorrow held for you. Either good things or bad things. You knew what tomorrow held. You knew what was going on with a dictatorship. Now, I would like to see a reigning monarch, to use a better term, a king or a queen who is good, who is basically good, who is moral and responsible. That would be far better than where everybody votes to disagree with everybody else. The only thing they agree on is to disagree, as I've said. So last week's message, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. All these themes that we gave you last time, I hope that's been going through your mind this week. I can pick the whole spirit of the times up. All the cynicism and the distrust and the bitterness and the rage that was going on then. You think that people are going to love people? People, you see, have seen people to be what they really are, as the Bible describes them, hopelessly unregenerate, degenerate, and lost. Our society has shown us what man is all about. People have seen the worst of each other in the last couple of decades. And so people don't trust people anymore. It'd have to be on some little Hollywood pop tune or country and western false song about love. Because you don't find that with people today. People have seen the worst. Where's the chivalry? Where's the bravery? We don't have that anymore today. Very rarely. Someone getting beaten, we all just turn our head and hope we don't get involved and pass by. Where's the chivalry and bravery? And if you ever do anything, then somehow you get involved in the court case and you end up getting charged for it. There's a case that's been going on about 4 years now
with a Christian man who had a dream of a woman being murdered. And this was in his dream. And he went to the police station and told them a dream that was so real and vivid he thought God was wanting to give a warning. That night, prior to him having that dream, I mean, this had already happened, and he got up the next morning and went and told to the police station, the local police station, this dream. That night, a murder had been committed in his town of a woman with the precise details of that dream. You know what they did? They locked him up. Who else could have the precise details but the one who committed the crime? He's been in prison 4 years now for dreaming a dream. He was a Christian young man, had nothing to do with it. God gave him a dream of what was happening. And he told the police, and they threw him in jail. Now, he's been out twice on, a release type situation, and they're getting real close to having him freed permanently now. Somehow they've got some psychiatrists and some loony birds, and they're proving that dreams are real and that people can have dreams and not be a part of it. But the police threw him in prison, threw him in jail, because he described intimately the details of that murder. He didn't know the woman. They didn't have any proof. The only proof they have was his own dream. There's no murder weapon, no fingerprints, nothing at all. The jury convicted him on his own dream there. That's what I would call the slimmest and slightest circumstantial evidence. I mean circumstantial evidence you could ever ask for. I mean, he didn't know the woman. There's no proof that he committed it at all. And he was judged guilty anyway. But what I'm saying is people don't get near. If that young man ever has a dream again, he'll keep his mouth shut from now on. He won't be like Daniel and go and tell the king of Babylon, because of what happens to those who go and tell the king of Babylon or the local police station. I tell myself, and I tell my wife, and I tell you all the time, I just hate that society had to work out this way, except I guess things have to get worse before they get better, before the second advent takes place. But it's just too bad that we weren't all born back in the late 40s and growing up in the late 40s and early 50s, or maybe even back into the 1870s. Oh, that would have really been something. It's hard to live today. It's kind of like not even worth living today. I don't know if you pick up the spirit that I do, but I just get tired of it all. Tired of it all. Tired of bills. Tired of going somewhere and having to do something. Why can't you just sit and not do anything, not have to go anywhere or buy anything, just sit somewhere. You don't get to do that very often. There are places to go and things to do and people to see all the time, it seems like. And you have to make a way. You have to make a way today to sit and meditate and be mystical. Because you're always at an automatic teller's machine or at a checkout counter somewhere, punching buttons and numbers are all flashing around and money's being either given to you or you're giving more often to someone else. And these things are going on all the time, and I just say, why does it have to be this way? But I tell you, I'm not cynical about the kingdom, though. I'm glad that it's happening. It has to get better has to get worse to get better. But it is, in one sense, too bad. We have to say, as they say, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Well, where have you gone, the good old days? A nation turned its lonely eyes to you. The Lonely Crowd. That's a good book, a good title anyway. The Lonely Crowd. And then here's another cause of individualism, which I guess is old as the garden, but it's certainly been manifested today, and that's the desire for personal freedom. Just a desire for personal freedom. Everybody's talking about freedom and liberty in the 20th century. The Chinese had their cultural liberation, and Latin America has its liberation theology, and the United States had its women's lib movement. The blacks had their civil rights movement. Everyone's talking about freedom and liberation today. Liberation for the man. Freedom for the individual. But we're not going to know any freedom until we know the freedom of John 8, verses 31 and 32. He said to those Jews who believed him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Everyone's talking about freedom. That's because it's the devil behind it all. He's the counterfeiter. He's the manipulator, telling people, now here's where you can get freedom. March for it. Be a woman and protest, or be a black, or be a Chinese, or be a Latin American. And here's your answer for bondage. It's cultural liberation, or liberation theology, or the women's lib movement. And that's not man's answer. That's not God's answer. That's the devil's answer, and people's desire for freedom. Now, what's the reverse? What are we saying in desire for freedom? People don't want to be tied down and committed. People just, plant themselves for a while, uproot, take off, gone. Friends aren't friends. You make some new ones, but keep those old ones. They're as good as gold. The gold ones, no way. I write to people I used to know, no response at all. Call them on the telephone, they don't even know you anymore. Christian friends I'm talking about. Try to write them letters, no commitment at all. I've argued that case to you before many, many times, that a letter deserves a response. I mean, you are less than a person when someone writes you, unless, for some other reason, but if they're writing, asking questions, you say, oh, no, I'm not. And you stow it away. No response at all. That just never ceases to amaze me. How I can try to write people a letter, no response at all. They do not want to be committed. They don't want to get involved at all. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get involved. No commitment at all. They want to be left alone in their own little isolated and insulated sphere. But you know what? The people, it's like the title of that book, The Lonely Crowd. People like that are not experiencing fulfillment in life. There's no way. There's no way. When you cut yourself off from all relationships, there's no way that you're going to experience fulfillment in life. You're after personal liberty and personal freedom. There's just no way. So we as Christians have to recognize this spirit that's taking over the age and acknowledge the fact that it is a dreadful foe of the church. It's a foe of American society, but it's a foe of the church as well. And it already has made inroads into the church. You're going to see later on, not this morning, but how it's even made inroads into our church. And we want to say some specific things, and I hope I won't hurt your feelings or something, but we're going to say them anyway, because I just know human nature and how the devil works, that people, they grow further in their Christian walk, and then certain truths or certain ideas or ideals begin to slip from their mind, begin to slip from their experience. And we must always be reminded. There's a verse over in 2 Peter chapter 1. It must be around verse 12. 2 Peter 1 around verse 12. Where Peter informs the people to whom he's writing, even though you already know these things, you are already established in the present truth, I am mindful to put you in remembrance by stirring you up. That is a text in 2 Peter 1 which proves we need to be reminded of things. He's telling the people, you already know these things. You are already established in the present truth. But I'm not going to be negligent to put you always in remembrance of these things by stirring you up. In other words, by reminding you of them is what stirs a person up. And I say that the church in the world has been affected by it. The church has really been affected by it. The false church has really been affected by it. The spirit of individualism. Take, for instance, all the programs that are found in most churches to meet every conceivable need. Well, I have the reason for that, but for an answer to every man there. Every conceivable program for every type of need. Instead of what's good for the whole body, like what we do in this church. It's not addressed to specific needs like, well, are you a woman, or are you a man, or are you a child, or are you widowed, or are you single, or are you elderly, or are you young, or why can't you just somehow get all that together and address a community of people? The church is a community. The church is a group of people. Paul clearly teaches that in Romans 14, as we'll see later. It is a community of people. It is not to be, as it is in most churches, a fragmented, disorganized, quote-unquote group of people scattered all over the world. People in most of your churches, if you know as well as I do, if they got a job offer for double the pay they're getting now, off in Timbuktu, they wouldn't even think of staying behind. They would leave on the first call to a better job offer. There's no commitment to the church of the Lord. There's no commitment to what's going on there. They would leave in an instant. better pay, better this, better that? Generally it is better pay. I told you a story here not long ago where a minister, he's a part-timer, got a good offer for a full-time, non-ministerial job, and he took it, and he quit the ministry. You know, he was part-time minister and part-time whatever he was doing, and he got a call to go do this, I don't know, it's probably something dumb. Well, it has to be something dumb compared to ministering, the privilege of getting to minister the Word, but it paid more money, though, so he left for that. Just left. There's no commitment at all. Let me give you a few examples from Scripture where I think the Scriptures themselves teach on this. We're not dealing with the church specifically so much here, but where the Scriptures teach on this business of the social responsibility that people and Christians need to recognize this, that they have a biblically based individual social responsibility. Now, this is not the same as what the neo-evangelicals are always clamoring about today. There's a social aspect to the gospel, and they're wanting the whole church to somehow get involved. No, the Bible calls for an individual, of all things, an individual social responsibility. You get both words in there, individual and social, for society. The individual's social responsibility. The social question of the ages was set forth back in Genesis chapter 4. The social question of the ages was set forth in Genesis chapter 4 when, after Cain had in wrath murdered his own brother and he was questioned of God as to his whereabouts, he selfishly responded, "Am I my brother's keeper?" That's the social question of the ages there. Am I my brother's keeper? In other words, do I have any responsibility to my brother? Can you ask his whereabouts through me? Why don't you ask him? Am I my brother's keeper? Do I have any responsibility toward him? Of course, the implication is yes, you are your brother's keeper. And he demonstrated how terrible a keeper of his brother he was by murdering his brother. Now that, we're not talking about two Christian men in the church there. That is a social setting there. We are our brother's keeper. Not in the old liberal social gospel sense out there, but we do have responsibility. We're not just a free person with no responsibilities to anyone around us. We are a society of human beings. And when we stop functioning as that, when we begin functioning as a fragmented group of individuals who are after the greed and the selfish life of individualism, then we won't last as a species. There's no way. We are meant to live together and to work together and to help one another. And of course, we're going to see in how much more then is this true of the church of the Lord, made to live together and to work together and to love one another. Why, the New Testament even uses things like a natural family as a metaphor for what the church is to be like. It's God's family. He is our Father. We are His children. That makes us family then. We are a family. Well, you almost have to think of a different metaphor today, because family doesn't mean anything today. Brothers kill brothers and sisters sisters today. We've lost even the imagery of that metaphor now. People aren't committed. They don't want to be committed. They don't want to know one another. They don't want to be bothered by one another. That is a terrible plague we need to avoid. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Must I have a sense of community and group responsibility? Must I have that sense? God's saying to Cain, yes, you must. And you showed what a terrible, poor keeper you were by killing the one I entrusted to you as the one to be kept by you, and vice versa as well. Abel never did anything wrong to Cain, but Cain, who was of that wicked one, the devil, 1 John 3, did to his brother Abel. Am I my brother's keeper? I know that the social gospel teachers have used that down through this century, but it's a biblical passage. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? That speaks of relationship. That speaks of responsibility. That speaks of commitment. We have more than that. In the New Testament, when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said, love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. We have a tape in ethics on what does it mean to love as thyself. We gave all the false series what the right theory is. Basically, what you would do for yourself, just the natural way that you take care of yourself, you're to help others in. It's not as though you have a self-love and so love others as you love yourself. The Bible teaches you not to have that form of self-love, but to have a self-hatred. You must hate your life in this world to gain it in the next life. You must deny yourself, not love yourself. It's a different type of love being talked about there. I said basically it's that functional love of commitment and helping and relationship. Jesus said the second greatest commandment is to love thy neighbor as thyself. You see, I think the problem with that commandment is it sounds so humanitarian and so socially oriented. People in a real supernatural type church setting have a difficult time identifying with that. We identify that mentality too much with the social gospel liberal people out there. And, we believe in the supernatural. Love thy neighbor as thyself. You see what I'm saying? It's almost, we identify that too much with the Sunday school mentality. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That was from the Lord himself as the second greatest commandment. Love thy neighbor. Take care of thy neighbor as you would take care of yourself. That's an awesome commandment right there. Take care of thy neighbor as you would take care of yourself. Matthew 7:12, all that you would others do to you, do ye even so to them.
Amen.
For this is the law and the prophets. The law, now that's the same one who also taught and practiced and believed in supernatural, miraculous type things. There's that part of our Christian life, and there's a functional part of our Christian life at the same time. We don't want to blur the two, but we don't want to take one and throw out the other, though. They're both there in our life. Jesus lived them both and taught them both. We're on one side of it right now with individualism and commitment, and we will be to the other side of it later on. All things that you would, that others do to you, do ye even so to them. This is the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets. What did they teach? Jesus said, here's what they taught. What did Moses? What's the great commandment from the law and the prophets? The second one, love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's a third example I would leave you with this morning. And that is that famous parable of a certain Samaritan. Jesus taught neighbor love in Luke 10. We've got a man wounded who needs help. A priest goes by, passes on the other side. He doesn't want to become involved. A Levite goes by. He passes on the other side. He doesn't want to be involved. A Samaritan who hates the Jews and is hated by the Jews, so his theology tells him, comes by and he stops and he helps the man. And Jesus said, this is the one who was neighbor to the man. The Samaritan. Who is my neighbor? He said, you got to turn the question around. Whose neighbor are you? Who is my neighbor? No. Whose neighbor are you? You're the neighbor of the one who has a need. Now, I don't mean for you to get too off in some other area like, well, I've just got to do everything for everyone around me, but this is an attitude, a biblical attitude that we have to maintain and understand. And I think that what this then puts us in is maybe both the best and the worst position for witnessing to other people. What do I mean by the best? Well, you're not going to be able to minister to that person if you haven't stuck a hand out to reach them and to help them. The worst of situations, people don't trust others coming and sharing with them religious notions or their church or their cult or their group. It puts you in both the best and the worst situation possible for witnessing to other people. I don't think that God ever intends these types of things to be ends in themselves. That you go over, your neighbor needs a hand, you go help your neighbor and just smile and there's nothing more to it. He's going to go to hell one day. I don't care how much you help him, you're sending his soul right to hell. Or you're not keeping his soul from hell. And again, that's in another message. I'm going to say more about that later on. I think that I would simply like to end this morning then with reminding you that if the church, which we'll be getting to here later on, if the church is, as the metaphor teaches us, the very family of God, then to experience problems in relationships in the church is really to experience one of the worst things that we could be asking for. If we're anyone's keeper, we're the keeper of our brother or sister in Christ. If we're anyone's keeper, we're certainly their keeper. If we don't go for the whole world, we certainly can't help all of them. We can certainly have the right attitude toward one another. You know, whenever we took our children just a few weeks ago to the fair down in Wells, that's kind of an annual event for us. Whenever they come in, we like to take the children down just to ride some of the rides and experience some other things and get out of the little world that they live in. I was with some other people here in the church. We were down there with our families together, and we walked past one man who was operating one of the rides, one of the amusements there. And you know, those are generally like the worst people in the world, the last people you would pick. They have nothing else to do but travel around with a stinking, stupid carnival or fair. And mostly they're just wasted people and wasted lives. Well, I happen to have on a tie and nice clothes, and one of the young men who was operating one of the pieces of equipment stopped me as we walked by and said, "Are you a dentist?" And I looked at him. There's a whole crowd around. He asked me, was I a dentist? And I said, "No." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, I have a terrible, terrible toothache, just a terrible tooth problem." So we started talking about his tooth problem for a few moments. And I could tell that I wanted it to lead somewhere else beside his tooth problem. And so I gave the tickets for my children's rides to the other couple, and they were going to take all the children for a ride and let me stay there alone. I wanted to minister to this young man. And I told him what we're doing and what type of church we have, and his eyes just lit up. He's just a young man, 23 years old. And he said, "Wow," he said, "I can't believe it. I mean, it's kind of like you all kind of live together." I said, "Well, yeah, it's kind of like that. We kind of all do live together, and you work together, and you know one another, and you're with one another a lot." And he said, "Wow," he said, "that just sounds like a paradise almost, to be able to be like that." He said, "I don't know any churches like that." He said, "Most of them you just go in and it's real cold and formal, and I don't know any like that." And he said, "Maybe I could come and be a part of your church someday." And I said, "Well, you're certainly welcome to." We got home one night last week, about 10 o'clock one night, and the phone was ringing, and it was that young man on the phone. And he was calling from some place way down in Massachusetts somewhere, just saying, "I just want to keep in touch with you. I've been reading my Bible. I read those verses. I wrote some healing verses down for him. I've been reading those healing verses." He said, "I'm still looking forward to seeing you again and meeting some people in your church."